I'm Paul Green, I'm one of the cardiac dietitians, and I'm going to have a quick chat today about healthy eating and the heart. And down through the years, everything I've read and everything I've learned from patients and their families about heart disease is the real emphasis on diet and the heart health is the positive things that you're going to do that make the biggest difference. And a lot of these things matter a lot more after you've had a cardiac problem than preventing it in the first place. So it's really important to realize it's never too late to make some positive changes, but also if you've had a really good diet up until now is not the time to be a little bit cynical and think, well, what was the point of that? I'm not really going to stick to that. So what we're going to cover is a little bit about cholesterol first, to get the difficult stuff out of the way, a little bit about salt, alcohol, and finish off with the most important things, which we call the cardioprotective factors, those positive things that you can do to improve your heart health. So the first thing I want to cover is fats and cholesterol, and the reason why I like to cover that first is because usually it's on everybody's mind as the be all and end all of heart issues and diet. In fact it's not, and we're going to come on to some more interesting stuff in a while, but let's get it out of the way. The most important thing to understand about cholesterol is that it's a transport system which carries fats around in the body. So fats that you eat in your diet, or if you're burning off body fat through exercise or dieting, the cholesterol transports it around the body as well. And what happens is we have a balance of good and bad cholesterol, which some of you I'm sure have heard of. And at birth we have the same amount of good and bad, but by middle age we tend to have about 3 or 4 times as much bad cholesterol as good. So we're trying to even up that balance. But in addition to that, lifestyle can make a big influence on the balance of good and bad. Because if you do physical activity, again covered by one of the physios, you can boost your good cholesterol, and also diet, you can help lower your bad but also boost your good. And in essence, that's coming down to the type of fat in your diet. So we don't promote a very low fat diet. What we like to think is people look at the balance of good and bad fats in the diet. So we've got good and bad cholesterol and we've got good and bad fats. And in essence, I presume you've heard of a lot of these before. We got saturated fats, which are animal and dairy fats that tend to be solid at room temperature. And they're the ones that boost your bad cholesterol, so we need to limit them. And then we've got the unsaturates, poly and monounsaturates, which are the good fats and tend to be liquid at room temperature. And they tend to help keep down the bad but also boost the good. So they're the better blend of fats in the diet. So what we're looking to do is reduce saturated fats and replace some of them with unsaturated fats in the diet, the liquid and easy to spread fats. So what does that mean in practical terms? Well, cooking methods, maybe grilling, cooking in the oven. Cutting the visible fat off meat is a very important step, so we don't necessarily promote avoiding red meat, but maybe having leaner cuts and removing fat yourself, but still being able to enjoy your foods. Dairy products, again, we don't necessarily promote all low fat. A lot of it's to do with just getting the right balance, really. So dairy foods are important for calcium and protein, so we don't need to avoid them, but maybe it's a little bit like having less cheese less often rather than having to have a low fat cheese, things like that. If you're switching to semi-skim milk, that's well and good, but don't buy a big pot of double cream every time you pass the fridge, for example. Spreads and margarines, butters, things like that can be a complicated area. Nothing wrong with a little bit of butter in the diet, but the more easy to spread fats that are based on mono and polyunsaturated fats can be useful for some individuals who don't get their oil elsewhere, say in salads or in cooking and things like that. So the balance of fats is really important. We do encourage people to include more vegetable oils, olive oil, things like that, or you can change your spreads and make simple changes like that. But the most important thing to remember is that fats that we really need to avoid tend to be in the highly processed foods, so like confectionery, crisps, biscuits, cakes, etc., etc. Cheaper meat pies that don't have a big meat content, things like that. So we really need to cut back on those fats and, you know, enjoy those foods as in small amounts on occasions. So now I want to talk about salt, and it's been a bit of a contentious issue the last 20 years or so, because generally speaking 80% of the salt that we eat today is in processed foods that we buy. So it's very difficult to avoid salt. It's in a lot, we rely on a lot more on ready meals and pre-prepared foods and things like that. And if you compare that to when most people were growing up 20-30 years ago, 80% of the salt was what you used in cooking and at the table. So there's a whole difference about how salt is included in the diet now. So the mantra is, we say, pinch in cooking and try not to add too much at the table, but really the main thing is to avoid overuse of heavily processed foods that have a lot of salt. So for an example, an average medium-sized pizza that you might buy in the supermarket and pop in the oven, you will find actually some of them contain almost all of your salt allowance for a whole day. So that might be something about being a little bit more careful and say, I'll share a pizza with somebody else and put some salad or veg on the plate to balance things out, rather than expecting to avoid salt completely. And you know what? There's lots of good ways to flavour foods: herbs, spices, onions, garlic, peppers. I'm going to briefly mention alcohol as well, and I'm not trying to supersede any advice anyone's had from their medical team or pharmacist in relation to their medications, but alcohol, if you enjoy it, can be part of a balanced diet. It's fitting it into people's social lives and things like that. I think really that is a very important aspect to be aware of. So really, we do know excess alcohol can increase your blood pressure and your heart rate and put the body under strain, and obviously has a lot of extra calories as well. So we're always encouraging people to moderate their alcohol intake. And if you do like alcohol in small amounts, it can be part of a balanced diet. Sometimes it helps people relax, sometimes it's a social aspect. They do say a small amount of alcohol can boost your good cholesterol, but just remember, we're not encouraging teetotalers that they have to start drinking. You might be just as relaxed eating an ice cream or enjoying your favourite chocolate bar as to drinking a glass of wine or having a pint of beer. And I think that's really the key message. Everything is considered in moderation, really, whether it's alcohol, salt, fat. So as I mentioned, the cardioprotective foods, the foods that you include in your diet to help protect your health and your heart, are the most important aspects of diet. And the first of those is fibre. And the classic fibre that we tend to think about is hard fibres that you find in things like all bran and whole grain cereals and wholemeal bread. And that's quite good for you, it's good for your digestive system. But you need to include other fibres that are softer in nature and tend to have a big impact on our digestive system as well. And they're called soluble fibres. And you get them in fruits, vegetables, beans, pulses, lentils, porridge oats, things like that. And they have a very positive impact on your diet because they're good for your digestive system, but they help keep you fuller for longer. So you have your porridge for breakfast and you're not looking for biscuits a couple of hours later for snacks. Lots of veg or salad with your steak and oven chips or whatever you're having help balance out the meal. That's really important. So you're not going hungry, you're filling up on good foods, and it's also a good way of controlling blood glucose levels in diabetes and, as I said, satiety, feeling fuller for longer. So beneficial all round. And when you look at the high fibre foods, you will also notice that they're probably the best sources of the nutrients that are good for your heart. So things like vitamins and minerals and all these so-called aspects of superfoods, or so-called superfoods, are really important because they do protect your health. And really, they are the high fibre foods. Fresh, frozen, dried, canned, they all make a big impact. So we're not necessarily expecting people to be at the greengrocers on a daily basis. And what happens is the nutrients in those foods Number one, they help protect damage from the inside of your body in terms of cholesterol causing the build-ups in the arteries. They also help push the salt out of your body, so help balance out your blood pressure, and if you tend to have fluid retention and things like that from salt, so that's a really important message. So the last thing I want to mention is fish, and in particularly oily fish, which are very important for heart health. In fact, all seafoods are really important for heart health, and there's good evidence to say that populations that eat a lot of seafood in their diet have reduced cardiac risks. And it's never too late to start including some more in the diet, because traditionally we tended to eat fish on a Friday and have seafood at different times of the year. But now we've lost a little bit of that aspect. So the importance of seafood in terms of balanced diet has been emphasized many times, and one of the most important aspects is omega-3 in oily fish, which is very good for your heart, but also iodine, which is a very important component of your having a healthy thyroid, which controls your metabolism. So we really do promote fish, oily fish and seafood as part of a balanced diet. So to sum it up, with emphasis on the cardioprotective balance of the diet and focusing on the healthier positive aspects of the diet, really we've mentioned the Mediterranean diet, we've mentioned variety, and that's what I want to finish on. Enjoy your foods and enjoy a variety of different foods.